Got it.
Hi,
Oh,
I am Donna McDonald from the Institute of Gerontology at Wayne State University, and I'd like to welcome you to a series of educational videos created to help you on your journey in caregiving, whether as a professional or home-based. These videos were made possible by a grant called Functional Aging and Mindfulness for Seniors. The program today is on senior nutrition and inflammation. The presenter is Dana Rizzo. She has a passion for education. Please welcome Dana Rizzo.
hi, good morning, everybody. It's very nice for you to join us today to learn about healthy nutrition which soothes inflammation. And we're going to learn a lot about inflammation today, acute and chronic, and how it impacts our health. Now, our human body is incredible, and we all recognize that, I'm sure. But we have over 37 trillion cells and in our bodies, and it performs a multitude of tasks with precision and strength every day. Our hearts pump over 2,000 gallons of blood every day without taking a break, and our eyes distinguish over 10 million colors. Our thigh bones or femurs can withstand 6,000 pounds of compressive force. That's stronger than concrete. Our human body also comes with a built-in defense system, and it's a complex army of infection-fighting cells and proteins that warn other cells of invaders, and it fights them off when they arrive, and it heals any damage that results from the conflict, which is produced within our bodies. These are called antibodies. This inflammatory process is essential for survival, especially during this pandemic. You have seen the effects of inflammation in real time. If you've ever gotten a paper cut or sprained your ankle or pimple or even a bee sting, you'll notice that immediately you feel pain, you get redness, you get bleeding, you get swelling, and that's all of your defense system sending in white blood cells to help fight whatever the injury is, whether it be caused by a virus or a bacteria. Now, chronic inflammation, though, is not a good thing. Sometimes the immune system will misfire, and it turns our bodies against ourselves. This launches an autoimmune response that manifests in diseases like lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, psoriasis, and multiple sclerosis, and even type 1 diabetes. For example, in type 1 diabetes, the immune system attacks cells in its own pancreas, crippling the body's ability to produce the hormone insulin. And diabetes type 1 often occurs starting at birth. A growing body of evidence suggests that low-grade chronic inflammation, the kind that simmers for decades just below the surface, without our even being aware of it, contributes to some of the nation's leading killers, including cardiovascular disease, cancer, type 2 diabetes, which together are responsible for 2/3 of all the deaths in the United States, according to Mayo Clinic. And it is frightening, this chronic inflammation, because it's often silent, invisible, and insidious. It kind of sneaks up on us. So if you think about it, the nation's #1 leading killers are cardiovascular disease, cancer, and type 2 diabetes. We've really got to do something about chronic inflammation. The research is ongoing. Chronic inflammation is unique on how we all respond to the stressors in our lives. We are all unique, and effects are driven by a combination of our genes, our genetic complement, our lifestyle, and our current health. Researchers still have holes in their understanding of chronic inflammation. Researchers are still determining whether inflammation actually causes the disease process or contributes to it along with other factors, or is it an effect of the disease? When you have chronic inflammation, your body is in constant state of high alert, getting ready to go into battle. The release of inflammatory chemicals can affect different systems in our body, and it can be the cause of consequences of multiple diseases, according to Robert Schimmerling. Now, acute inflammation is the type of inflammation that occurs from trauma, harmful substances, a bacterial or viral invasion. And it's your body sending pro-inflammatory cells to destroy the damaging substances, and it helps to heal the tissues and return the affected area to a state of balance. The rapid response results in all of the symptoms you see when you injure yourself, such as swelling, pain, redness, and heat. These innate immune systems of acute inflammation occur because it begins by when an injured tissue sends a message to our mast cells. The mast cells release a chemical of histamine. Histamine is what causes the swelling, the redness, and the heat. Then there's other chemicals, chemotaxins. This is a chemical that is sent to the damaged tissues and to whatever germs have invaded the area. The first soldiers to arrive in this immune army are the neutrophils. Those are the big white blood cells that are the most abundant white blood cell in the body is called the neutrophil, and they go on the attack. Then after the war is over and they've fought the virus, the bacteria, or the injury, phagocytes come in. This is another type of white blood cell that engulfs, consumes, and destroys all the harmful organisms. And the byproduct of this process, along with the continuing distress signals sent out by the damaged tissues, create the acute inflammatory response. And the macrophages, which is another white blood cell, eventually are sent in to clean up the dead virus cells, the dead bacterial cells, and the dead damaged tissue. So you can see that these trillions of cells, how many of them are there to help with our immune systems. These neutrophils are wonderful. These neutrophils, which are the white blood cells, they're like hand grenades of the immune system. They blow up everything in sight, healthy or not. So each neutrophil does have a short lifespan, but in chronic inflammation, these neutrophils continue to be sent out long after the real threat to the body is over, damaging even the healthy tissues in their path. 40 to 60% of our white blood cells are neutrophils that help fight infections in our body, especially the bacterial infections. And these are your neutrophils. This is a neutrophil right here, and these are your red blood cells. But these neutrophils are like those little hand grenades that are sent right to the area of injury or infection, and they help to start the immune response. The study results show this, that cardiologists in Boston reported on a clinical trial with more than 10,000 patients, and that's a big clinical trial, with patients in 39 countries, with the average age being 61. And they tested to see if anti-inflammatory drugs could lower the rates of heart disease. And the results were that it could lower heart disease. So these special anti-inflammatory drugs really did help reduce the inflammation, thus lowering heart disease. They also found that these special anti-inflammatory drugs reduced lung cancer mortality by 77%. They also found that gout and arthritis also fell with the use of these special anti-inflammatory drugs. So when inflammation increases, so does your risk for disease, because anytime you have chronic inflammation, it's going to turn on your immune system. But your immune system can get tired of fighting. It can get fatigued, thus making you more susceptible to any viruses or bacteria, the common cold, the flu, all those things that are kind of floating around us. And this is by Dr. Dana DiRenzo, who is a rheumatologist at Johns Hopkins Hospital in Maryland. Now, by contrast to acute inflammation, because acute inflammation is short-lived, it turns itself off after the infection or the injury has occurred. But in chronic inflammation, it is not short-lived, and chronic inflammation is rarely helpful. Chronic inflammation may begin with the same cellular actions as acute inflammation, but it morphs into a lingering state that persists for months or many years. The body sounds the alarm, there's a war cry, all these emergency white blood cells arrive, but the threat never recedes. And the firing continues and continues to send out neutrophils, macrophages, all these white blood cells, and to burn within our bodies. And this misfiring of the immune system is what causes chronic inflammation. And as we talked about chronic inflammation, as we previously discussed, it's sneaky, it's insidious, and it's linked to over 60 serious diseases, over 60 serious diseases. So here we have it again. We have how can something so natural as the immune system become so toxic to our health? Now, you remember in the other slide, we only had one neutrophil sliding going around, floating around. But in this slide, you see this overstimulation of white blood cells, these neutrophils. And this is what it looks like when we're looking at chronic inflammation. In acute versus chronic inflammation, in acute, you have progressive healing. You have an acute inflammatory response, but it begins the healing process. And this occurs with chemical irritants, frostbite, cuts, lacerations, or stabbings, trauma like bruises, sprains, strains, and broken bones. An allergic reaction, it can occur with burns such as sunburn, fire burns, or touching hot objects, or a short-lived infection like pneumonia, the flu, and even COVID. So we're looking at progressive healing with acute inflammation. But in chronic inflammation, those neutrophils never turn off. The immune system never rests, and it just keeps misfiring. So you get progressive destruction, and it leads to chronic inflammation. So you develop cardiovascular disease, autism, rheumatoid arthritis, autoimmune diseases such as lupus or rheumatoid arthritis. You can get Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. You can get neurological diseases such as MS and Parkinson's and dementia, Alzheimer's. And here we have Alzheimer's, and you can also develop cancer. For instance, in an autoimmune disease where you are constantly fighting chronic inflammation, you can have ulcerative colitis that because of the chronic inflammation in the bowel, you can develop colon cancer. Diseases linked to chronic inflammation include the metabolic syndrome, which is characterized by having obesity, diabetes, and a very wide girth. You can see chronic infections, injuries, arthritis, Alzheimer's disease, asthma, allergies, ulcerative colitis, and inflammatory bowel disease. You can get colon, breast, and lung cancers. You can get chronic joint pain, eye disorders. You can get cardiovascular disease. You can get chronic inflammation of the gums called gingivitis. You can get diabetes, where the body turns against itself, its own pancreas. The autoimmune system destroys the cells that produce insulin, and you develop diabetes. And of course, chronic obesity. And all of these diseases are linked to chronic inflammation. And again, this is just reiterating what we've already discussed. In the heart, it can lead to asthma, cardiovascular disease. It promotes atherosclerosis and coronary artery disease. It can promote chronic obstructive pulmonary disease because of the chronic inflammation, and even cystic fibrosis. In the brain, it can cause chronic inflammation, can lead to dementia, Alzheimer's, depression, Parkinson's disease, MS, multiple sclerosis, chronic fatigue, and even depression. On the extremities or the legs, it can cause rheumatoid arthritis, osteoarthritis, and even lupus. In the GI system, chronic inflammation can lead to cancer of the colon, type 2 diabetes. It can increase the metabolic syndrome because with chronic inflammation, you have high levels of cortisol, which raises your blood sugar and tends to help people to gain weight. You have obesity, gastritis, inflammation of the gut, the inflammatory bowel disease, Crohn's disease, colitis. You can also get a non-alcoholic fatty liver disease and even celiac disease. How acute inflammation turns chronic is being investigated. But in chronic inflammation, what may have started out as a solution to the problem, getting rid of a dangerous invader such as a pathogen, whether it be a bacteria or a virus, it now becomes the problem. Chronically inflamed tissues continue to send out alarms that signal the body's immune response long after the threat has been cleared out. When white blood cells heed the call and arrive at the scene, they may attack healthy tissues and organs, further amplifying the response and setting up a persistent inflammatory state. And as a result, rather than healing the tissue, according to Harvard researchers, the white blood cells begin breaking down the good tissue. Remember the neutrophil, which is like the hand grenade? It actually starts damaging good tissues. Chronic inflammation can develop several ways, according to Harvard and Johns Hopkins researchers. One way is that the body cannot effectively rid itself of the threat, whether it be an offending substance like COVID, an infectious organism, or an irritant or chemical substance. One way is that the body cannot effectively rid itself of this threat, whether it be the threat can be over, but it cannot effectively get rid of the threat and it cannot effectively turn itself off. Another scenario is that the immune system goes into threat mode when there is really no threat at all. So it can become an autoimmune disorder where the immune system becomes overly sensitive to the body's own healthy cells and tissues. It reacts against its own joints, its own intestines, and other organs and tissues as if they were dangerous. As the inflammatory process continues, it damages the body instead of healing it. Signs and symptoms of chronic inflammation include fatigue and lack of energy, depression and anxiety, muscle aches and joint pain. How many of you have ever been on vacation and you realize suddenly that your arthritis doesn't hurt anymore? That suddenly you're walking well and you're going through, the new towns and the new villages that you're vacationing to, and you notice, geez, I feel really good today. I don't have any muscle pain or joint aches. That's because you have reduced the inflammation by reducing your stress. A chronic inflammation can include constipation, diarrhea, and other GI complaints. It can cause changes in your weight or your appetite. It can cause headaches. It can cause a fuzzy or foggy mental state. The symptoms of chronic inflammation can linger over the long term, or they can come and go over time, but they're insidious. They're kind of sneaky. You don't even know that it's going on internally. And you just kind of live with having constipation. You kind of live with having diarrhea. You kind of live with heartburn. When good inflammation turns bad, situations where the immune system does not turn itself off, we've already discussed this. When the immune system fails to revert to its normal or to its baseline, when the immune system keeps misfiring and saying, oh, I've got another flu, I've got another COVID, I've got another cold, or when the inflammation is the result of a lifestyle that is poor or the aging process. We know that inflammation can be the result of a lifestyle or aging. With aging, we have inflammaging. This is a new term, inflammaging. And this is chronic inflammation, which has risk factors for a number of diseases that are more common with age, such as high blood pressure, diabetes, hardening of the arteries, which is called atherosclerosis, and even cancer. Scientists have found that with age itself, we have higher levels of inflammatory molecules in our bodies. With age comes more cytokines in our blood, and more so than the young adults. The process by which aging leads to chronic inflammation is very complex, involving a number of cellular processes. The big player is the reactive oxygen species, ROS, which includes the free radicals. And we've heard about free radicals for a while now. We know that the reactive oxygen species, ROS, form when our bodies are exposed to smoking, even secondhand smoke, drugs, marijuana, or other drugs, excessive sunlight, or excessive pollution. As our bodies try to balance the extra oxygen molecules and the free radicals with the unpaired electron, it cascades, and chronic inflammation is the result of this, causing free radicals. So it's so important to really protect your bodies against exposure to smoking, drugs, sunlight, and pollution. When inflammation is the result of lifestyle issues, we can blame inflammation in the that occurs in the elderly, which is a gradual decline of the immune system, which Harvard researchers call the immune senescence. And the body tries to repair the damaged cells done by the free radicals, but over time they take their toll. With age comes shrinking of the thymus gland, which is a tiny organ in the chest where these T cells are trained. T cells are needed to fight infections. That's why in the course of my career, when an 80-year-old is recovering from a flu, her length of time to recover is longer than a 30-year-old that has the flu. And it's because of the T cells. The T cells are working better in the younger person than they are in the older person. It takes that older person a little longer to recover from even the common cold, the flu, all of that. And that's because the T cells have been impaired in their production as we age. But as we age, it takes its toll. Because the longer we are on the planet, we are exposed to more harmful pollution, UV radiation from the sun, chemicals in cigarettes, and secondhand smoke. And this can all lead to low-grade chronic inflammation. Obesity, as the years accumulate, so does our weight. An average of 1 to 2 pounds per year from early adulthood through middle age is expected. Only 1 to 2 pounds per year, certainly not 10 to 15. Nearly 40% of Americans are obese, meaning that their body index mass is greater than 30% or higher. Chronic inflammation is one of the consequences, according to scientists. Buildup of fat ramps up the immune response, leading to a cycle of low-level inflammation. Diet. We know that we often fill our plates. How we fill our plates can promote inflammation or help to control inflammation. Diets very high in saturated fats and refined sugars are associated with increased production of pro-inflammatory molecules, stimulating inflammation. Pro-inflammatory foods include white flour, white bread, lots of cookies and cakes, pastries, fried foods, soda, sugar-sweetened drinks, even sweetened iced tea, red and processed meats, margarine and shortening. Not only do these foods directly stimulate the release of inflammatory cytokines, but they promote weight gain, meaning that there will be more fat cells releasing adipocytokines. Foods like green leafy vegetables, fatty fish like mackerel, sardines, and salmon, and olive oil have the opposite effect. They suppress the pro-inflammatory molecules and enhance the production of anti-inflammatory ones. So eating a salad a day will keep the doctor away and will lower your risk of chronic inflammation. Eating fatty fish like salmons, sardines, mackerel, even tuna fish out of a can packed in water is very good for you. Using olive oil on your salads is fantastic. Stay away from coconut oil. It's not good for you. Vegan sources of protein. There's lots of things that we get protein from. Many of us don't realize that protein comes from tofu. It comes from chickpeas. It comes from peas, salads, dark green salads, mushrooms. It comes from legumes and nuts. In this, you can see broccoli gives us protein, mushrooms, spinach, lots of protein, asparagus, avocados. In fact, did you know that a slice of avocado gives you as much protein as a 3-ounce piece of salmon? So if you have an avocado and you take a slice off and you dice it up and put it in your salad every day, you are really helping yourself with the omega-3s and from the same amount that you would get from salmon. We know that tofu and soy milk, all of these things are very good for building our protein up without fat red meats. Sedentary lifestyles. The couch potato lifestyle has long been linked to health risk such as obesity, high blood pressure, heart disease, type 2 diabetes, osteoporosis, and depression. A study in the journal PLOS One found elevated levels of pro-inflammatory cytokine interleukin IL-6 in people who spend a lot of time sitting. And you don't want that. A sedentary lifestyle has a great effect on increasing chronic inflammation. Your exercise goal is to walk 150 minutes per week, or you could walk 4,000 steps a day. If you walk at least 7,500 steps every day, you're going to reduce your risk of heart disease and stroke by 40%, according to Mayo. So walking 150 minutes per week, what I do is on my phone, I have a step counter. It came with the phone, and it looks just like this. It comes with a little red heart. Oh, let's see. All righty. It's an app that has a white box with a little red heart. And that is a step counter that came with your phone. And that will keep track of your steps every single day. You can see where all of these seniors, these are small weights. You can get them at Target or Walmart. They're about 1 pound, 2 pounds, or 3 pounds. Well, just walking briskly is needed. Look at the lace-up shoes that they're wearing for good arch support and to help prevent falls. All of this is building your core strength, which helps you to reduce your weight, improve your mental state, keep you socially engaged, which keeps your brain sharp. Smoking. Beyond its relationship to cancers, lung disease, and many other health problems, smoking is a known accelerator to inflammation. It is linked to chronic inflammation. This includes e-cigarettes, pipes, cigars, medical marijuana, and secondhand smoke. Remember, smoke is smoke, and anything other than oxygen going into your lungs is not a good idea, is bad for you. Besides the 244 known carcinogens found in every single cigarette, cigarettes create the ROS, the reactive oxygen species and free radicals, which damages the delicate cells lining your lungs, your breathing airways. These damaged cells activate your immune response, causing chronic inflammation. And that's how chronic inflammation can accelerate chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, emphysema, and it can lead to cystic fibrosis and all those other diseases. Stress. We know that stress is similar in that it accelerates inflammation, and we know that stress in small amounts can help us get to the finish line, help us to meet the deadline for a big project. But stress that is continual and is never relieved will lead to long-term stress, which is detrimental and will lead to chronic inflammation. Eustress is positive stress. It's a stress we feel on the day that we get married or our children get married. It's getting an A on a test. It's winning a race. It's getting a new job. It's meeting a deadline at work. Right now, I'm experiencing eustress, positive stress, because I love sharing and teaching, and I have a passion for sharing health concepts with people. Now, distress is the damaging stress. Distress is the chronic stress, such as every month we get those high bills. We have a very stressful job that we hate, that we have to go to every single day. It's those very high demands with a job that occur every single day. It's kids that maybe are having issues. It's having a poor marriage where there's constant and chronic conflict within the marriage. And we know that it's the fight or flight mechanism. And years ago, we had the fight or flight when a saber-toothed tiger came in to the cave. The caveman knew he had to get his spear ready, and he either had to fight the saber-tooth or he had to run out the back of the cave to safety. But nowadays, it's not a life-threatening stress that gets us. It's this damaging chronic stress called distress that we face every single day. It's not a threat to our lives, but it turns on the same stress response in our bodies that it did during caveman times. So it's overreacting. The release of stress hormones like cortisol and adrenaline makes our heart rates go up, our blood pressures go up, our breathing goes up, our pupils dilate, and our palms get sweaty. And our muscles get stiff and they're braced for action. And this is all well and good when you are under threat of life. But for instance, when this response occurs in traffic jams, when you get a bill, when you have work stress or health stressors, when suddenly you find out, oh, my doctor just gave me the bad news, I'm obese and I now have hypertension and high cholesterol. Well, those health stressors kind of stay in your mind. The cause of the stress response is that it fires again and again, causing that chronic inflammation to never turn off. The continuous rush of cortisol makes your tissues and your immune cells less sensitive to its effects. As a result, the cortisol becomes less effective at regulating this inflammatory response, and it spirals out of control. So, combating chronic inflammation and with lifestyle changes, the best way to do it is to eat to beat inflammation. You want to make sure that your diet has the right amount of bacteria in its gut so that you have a microbiome in your guts that are healthy. And the best anti-inflammatory diets that are out there is the Mediterranean diet. They've done research on this for years. Fresh fruit, nuts, fish, seeds, vegetables, and olive oil is the mainstay of your daily diet. The DASH diet, which is a dietary approach to stop hypertension, is very similar to the Mediterranean diet, and it's low in total fat and saturated fat. It's got lots of fruits and vegetables and whole grains, which lowers your cholesterol. It has protein that is supplied by low-fat dairy products like skim milk or 1% milk, low-fat cheese, fish, poultry, and nuts. Red meats and sweets and sugary drinks are limited. And the DASH diet is also very high in fiber, potassium, calcium, and magnesium, and very low in sodium in order to control your blood pressure. There's a Dr. Andrew Wills, W-E-I-L, Dr. Wills, and he created the anti-inflammatory diet, which is a Mediterranean diet with an Asian influence. And it's really quite tasty. And there's a lot of good books out there by Dr. Andrew Wills. About 40 to 50% of your calories come from carbohydrates, 30% from unsaturated fats, and 20 to 30% come from lean proteins. Here's the Mediterranean pyramid. And here it starts out with practice daily physical exercise and enjoyment, having fun, eating meals with your family, going for a walk. Enjoy every single day, whole grains, vegetables, fruits, legumes, herbs, spices, and healthy fats. Enjoy your proteins at least 3 times a week, but get them from fish sources. You can get them from turkey, chicken. You can get them from pork, but take off all the fat. Shellfish. Consume 1 or 2 times per week poultry without the skin, eggs, and dairy products. On the pyramid diet, you are allowed red meats and sweets, but they say limit the consumption to maybe once a month. And the red meats are lean red meats, like your, it's the cheaper cuts of meat, the lean meats, like your, I'm going blank here, but it's the cheaper, like flank steak. Or London broils, where you have to marinate it because it has so little fat, it's a little bit tough. But those lean red meats are healthier. Stay away from filet mignon. The reason it melts in your mouth is that it's loaded with fat, and you pay a lot more for it besides. So keep that in mind. The Mediterranean DASH diet cookbook, they've combined those 2 diets together, but you can see you've got your salmon and you've got your noodles that are actually not made from flour. They're actually made from spaghetti squash or from zucchini and other things. This is Dr. Wills. You want to make sure that you're using whole grain pastas, and that's important. You want to stay away from foods that are high in fat because they all contribute to chronic inflammation. High sugar, high fatty foods, foods that contain no fiber are very low in fiber are often the processed foods that we pick up at Burger King, McDonald's. Stay away from places like that, because these foods also feed the bacteria in the gut called the microbiome, and that throws off the balance between good bacteria in the gut and bad bacteria in the intestines. The leaky gut term is often used, and this is when toxins in the gut leak into the blood and cause an inflammatory response. And remember, your immune system cells are located near the intestines, and they're taking their cues from the inflammatory or the inflammation within that leaky gut. So remember, our immune system is always on the alert. This is an army within ourselves that is on the alert for any problems. These are the foods that look so attractive and pretty, but we've got to stay away from them. Dunkin' Donuts is probably one of your worst friends, with all their donuts and their muffins and things like this, and the candy. They make them attractive, but they're very bad for us. Instead of this tremendous hamburger with French fries, and you can see they threw on 1 slice of tomato and a little bit of lettuce, it's not offsetting all the fatty protein you're getting and how bad that white bread is. Instead, you can have a salad with different varieties of fruits and vegetables every day. You can put on an egg for protein. You can put tuna fish on it. You can put salmon on it. All of this, and white mushrooms will provide protein as well. And different legumes, cannoli beans, red beans, white beans will give you the protein. So our summary today is that we want to eat to beat inflammation. We want to exercise regularly. We want to manage our weight. We want to get enough sleep to help reduce stress. We need 7 to 9 hours of sleep a day. We don't want to smoke. We don't want to be around people that smoke. And we want to really take that seriously. We want to limit our alcohol use. Even on the Mediterranean diet, you're allowed 1 4-ounce glass of wine every day. 1 4-ounce glass of wine. The unfortunate thing is that today they're selling goblets that are this big, and that is almost 3 glasses of wine. So you've got to be careful about the size glass. You want to also reduce chronic stress and distress. You want to exercise daily, go for a swim, walk in the park, take Tai Chi or yoga. You want to start a journal so you can write down all the good things that you're grateful for every day. Or you could write down the things that are troubling you. Help clear your mind so you sleep better. You can even try water aerobics. And I want to thank you so much for being here today for our conversation on senior nutrition and inflammation. Thank you. Have a lovely day.